All right, let's start with the basics, or as basic as we can get when talking about blockchain interoperability. For those unfamiliar, can you explain what cross-chain swaps are and how persistence is tackling challenges that come with the interoperability across blockchains?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for those who don't know, like blockchains are pretty much like standalone environments. So they can't really talk well to each other, which means that if you have a specific asset that is in one wallet, let's say on one blockchain, and you want to get that asset to another wallet on another blockchain, it's very hard to do that. So you need some sort of a bridge or a connection between those different networks or different blockchains to move assets between. And that's actually what we're doing. So rather than moving the physical asset between the two different chains, we find for every buyer or for every seller of one asset on one side, we find a buyer on the other side. So we basically match a buyer and a seller on each of these networks so that they are happy with the transaction across both, and they basically offset. I'm not sure if that makes sense. It's like a
Yeah.
very simple explanation of a cross-chain swap is just finding a buyer and a seller for like the same trade but opposite sides on two different chains.
Okay. And how does persistence approach to, did you just say, is it BTC Fi? Is that kind of what you say? Like,
Yeah, so we call this entire like industry that we're in like BTC Fi. I call it like Bitcoin powered decentralized finance.
okay.
So for me, that's a pretty broad term. So obviously, when I say Bitcoin powered, I mean everything that uses Bitcoin somewhere in this form of decentralized finance. I'm kind of assuming that your audience is familiar with decentralized finance.
Sure, of course.
So basically, BTC Fi is kind of short for Bitcoin DeFi in a way. And so when we talk about BTC Fi, it's like wherever Bitcoin, the asset, is used in DeFi. Traditionally, DeFi actually started on Ethereum, right? Like Ethereum was the first place where you had a lot of smart contracts. You had that programmability. And the first like DeFi boom was actually really on Ethereum a couple of years back. Bitcoin didn't have that, and Bitcoin always started off, and actually started off as like a means of payment, but then kind of moved into this entire thing of like store of value, digital gold type of narrative, right? Which everyone knows Bitcoin is supposed to be held and kept only and nothing else. And that's kind of the core for a lot of Bitcoiners. But more recently, Bitcoin DeFi or BTC DeFi became a thing because Bitcoin has moved, although slowly, over the last couple of years to become more programmable. There's been a few upgrades to the Bitcoin network, which have allowed for additional programmability of the Bitcoin blockchain. On top of that, there's a whole bunch of what we call layer twos that have kind of popped up who are building some sort of a scaling solution, I would say, for Bitcoin. Because one of the biggest problems with Bitcoin is that it's not easy to scale. It's quite slow. And that's kind of the trade-off they make with like the security and the decentralized aspect of the chain. But so with these like layer twos, scalability and programmability are kind of addressed. Now, all of these like layer twos are actually additional blockchains on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. And instead of doing the actual transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain, you can now do your transaction way cheaper, way faster on these like different networks of chains on top of the Bitcoin chain. So on these layer twos. Now, that's great for people who want to actually do Bitcoin DeFi and like still use the security of the Bitcoin network to do DeFi transactions, like including Bitcoin the asset. So let's say using Bitcoin as a collateral asset, right, or Bitcoin as a trading asset. So that's all great, but the issue that it creates with all this like development of like layer twos is that these are all separate networks still, although they're all connected to the Bitcoin layer one. They're all kind of separate ecosystems in themselves. And if we want to grow the pie when it comes to like Bitcoin DeFi and really want to make this a booming ecosystem, it can't be that you have to go from or let's say from like layer two to the main layer to then go back to another layer two. That's just too slow, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of gas, like cost fund for transactions.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is really building that bridge between all the layer twos to make it very easy to move around these like different layer twos so that you don't have to use the layer one actually.